to RPG Fans Retro Encounter. RPG Fans bi-weekly show of many different topics, mostly about retro games. I am your guest host today, Ben Love, and I'm joined by a lovely panel for our episode 488. Wow, we're really getting up there on
Close to
Xanadu.
500.
Yep.
Yeah, close, very close to 500. And today we're going to be talking about Xanadu Next, a PC role playing game developed by Nihon Falcom in 2005. It wasn't released here until 2016, so not as old, doesn't feel as old maybe for us, but is quite an old one, but a very good one. So joining me today, you've already heard, Aleks Franiczek, and also
Hello.
Audra Bowling.
Hello. I'm waiting for Brave Sir Knight.
Great. Well, I think this is a really good panel. And I think neither of you have played this game before, right?
No, I have not.
No, me neither. In fact, Falcom is a pretty big blind spot in my JRPG playing, which I know like we have lots of fans of
Yeah.
Ys and Trails on the site, but I think
They
the only
make good
Falcom
games.
game I've played is like Ys 3, which is like a weird one.
So not like Oath and Felghana, but like the original.
Yeah, on like Super
Ys 3.
Nintendo.
Oh.
Wow.
It was like kind of Zelda 2-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which
yeah.
it doesn't seem like the rest of the series is like that, so it seemed like an oddball release in that sense. But yeah, I'm definitely looking to address that, and this is definitely one of their games that caught my attention.
I wanted to take another Falcom game off my list to play. So it's like, yes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you guys your histories with like Falcom in general, but you guys already got to that for me, so that's perfect. And Audra, I know you are a big Falcom fan. You review most of the Falcom releases for the site, and
Yes, I do like a lot of Ys and Trails games in particular.
yeah. So this
Xanadu's
one
a
is
bit of a blind spot, so I was eager to try this one out.
Yeah, I'm excited to get your take on it because this, Xanadu Next kind of comes from what I consider to be like the golden age of Falcom's like history. So starting in like 2003 with Arc of E6, Arc of Napishtim, and then going all the way to like 2012 with Night Trails to Nayuta, is kind of what I think is like their like peak. And then, I mean, the new games are good, but this is kind of where they were there. I feel like they're most like creative
The
and
golden
experimental.
age.
Yeah, and like I think the Trail series was kind of at its height in that time frame, and it was when they were still like making a lot of PC games, but they'd also started working on consoles too. So you had a lot of like, especially the PSP, they were releasing a lot of games on. So you still kind of had that old school PC development, and then kind of more of the modern stuff on console, and kind of a mix of the two. And that created like a really interesting environment for their game development for different kinds of games like this one. Um, Xanadu, if you're not familiar with Xanadu as a series, the first Xanadu is actually Dragon Slayer 2. So Dragon Slayer 1 was like a very early PC role playing game developed by Falcom. It was kind of like their first big hit. And then Xanadu is like the sequel to that game, but is also kind of started its own series. And Aleks, you mentioned earlier, like, oh, it was kind of Ys 3 was kind of Zelda 2 style. Well, that is also kind of how the first Xanadu is. It's a side-scrolling, action RPG, much like Zelda 2, and it was a big hit for them. And so it kind of spawned its own sub-series. So there's a couple other games that make up the Xanadu series, and they're all kind of loosely connected to each other, but not really directly. There's Xanadu that's on the Famicom and the NES. And then you have Legend of Xanadu and the Legend of Xanadu 2, which were released in 94 and 95. And then 10 years later, in 2005, they released Xanadu Next. So, and Xanadu Next is kind of interesting because it doesn't really have that much connection to the other games. It doesn't really play like the other games. Um, and actually, that is a good question for the both of you. When you guys played this game, what were the first things that came to mind as far as like other games similar to it? Let's start with you, Alex.
I mean Diablo, for sure. Yeah, like you were saying, like the early Dragon Slayer and Xanadu games were kind of like early Japanese action RPGs, but then like I think when most people think of like action RPGs or like the ARPG genre, they think of like Diablo, and like that kind of like dungeon crawling, clicking around enemies sort of kind of gameplay. And I played like the Diablo games. I never got like super into them, but probably the best time I had with them was the first one, Diablo 1, which had like kind of like a slower pace than Diablo 2 and its successors. And this kind of like felt like a bit of a more of an iteration on that than like kind of like the faster pace, more looty Diablo 2 style of gameplay. And so yeah, just from like a general gameplay standpoint, I think that was the closest comparison. Other than that, and I think we talked about this a little bit before, Ben, like kind of like proto Souls stuff going on here, I think, with like the
Hmm.
interconnected level design and things like that, the kind of more sparse way you kind of like discover the history and lore of the world. And then there's box puzzles, which kind of reminded me of like Zelda or Vagrant Story or something.
Yeah, yeah. And Audra, what about you?
Probably my limited knowledge of old school Zelda games. I felt like that was, and maybe even almost like kind of Metroidvania because you got like different abilities as you
Mm.
go,
Hmm.
but it all depends on the items you equip, which is kind of Zelda to me, and even a little ease.
Yeah, yeah. No, so that's perfect. You guys mentioned all of the big series that I would have wanted you to to hit. So
Yay!
thank you. Yeah, it is. It's you've got. I mean, the way it's kind of laid out is it's kind of like a top down. You know, you click and point to move, and you click to attack and everything, and you have like your special attack that you've equipped on your right click. So it's very, very similar to Diablo, as you said, Alex. Like there's a lot of influence clearly from Diablo. And I think you're right to point out Diablo 1 because, you know, that game is a lot more contained than Diablo 2. It's a little less heavy on the like tons of loot dropping
Mm.
and mowing through tons and tons of enemies, and it's more focused on like the one town and then the dungeon underneath that town. And this game kind of has a very similar structure to that. And then Audra, yeah, I totally agree with you about it having that Zelda influence as well, because you're picking up these like artifacts as you go through the dungeons that give you different abilities to progress further, and you're also picking up a lot of keys, which is one of
Yes.
the major things in this game is the key economy, to open locked doors and go into different parts of the dungeon. And so that gives you also like a little bit of non-linearity, right? So you go into the dungeon, usually you kind of have a couple different ways you can go, and then they're all behind locked doors, and then you kind of have however many keys you have, and you can kind of decide, oh, do I want to go this way, that way, and that kind of will change your route through the dungeon a little bit. And yeah, also the block pushing puzzles. This game loves block pushing.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
But I think they kind of use them to pretty good effect. Like they do feel a little artificial. Like you'll go into a room and all of a sudden there's just like these colored boxes, and it's like, oh, I wonder why these are here. It doesn't feel very like naturalistic, but they do a lot of interesting things, I think, with the box puzzles. But yeah, there's a good amount of puzzle solving here, so it's not like, you know, Diablo. You know, it's mostly combat, right? You're going to the dungeon, you're doing combat with enemies, you're getting loot, you're going back to the town to like resupply, and then going back in the dungeon. And Xanadu Next kind of follows that same structure, but you do have a little bit more variety with puzzle solving and you know, environmental kind of storytelling and things like that that do make it feel a little different than like a straight up, action RPG dungeon crawler like Diablo. So yeah, I'm glad that you guys kind of saw those influences, and I think that's part of what makes this game such an interesting game and so different too than a lot of Falcom's other work. Is that they kind of took influence from so many different places, and so you have this really
Mm.
kind of unique and interesting game that doesn't feel like anything else. And
Yeah.
Alex, you mentioned too, Vagrant Story. So I think if we want to get into a little bit the setup and the background in this game, I think it's cool that you mentioned Vagrant Story because I think this game really does have a world and a setting, and the storytelling reminds me a lot of some of those Yasumi Matsuno games. Like,
Absolutely.
I can
Yeah,
see
like
that.
a very similar, even just like color palette to
Mhm.
Evil East. Like the colors don't really pop. They're like kind of just like more subdued. A lot of like kind of like subdued beige and green and gray. And this whole like kind of history, like the story's still pretty like vague in my head because of how like sparse the way the lore is distributed is, but like it seems like very much about like kind of like there was prosperity and then like things kind of collapsed, and like the war of knights happened where like there's like a group of like noble knights, but now they've like kind of like lost their honor, and are trying to like reclaim it, and like just like kind of that feeling that like this is a world way past its prime, and like you're kind of exploring a ruin is like very reminiscent of Vagrant Story.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And the kind of setup that you have for the protagonist is that he was part of this group of knights called the North Sea Chevalier, and they fought in this war called the War of the Knights. And his mentor and companion was the leader of those knights called Marquis Furnival. And after the conclusion of the war, there's a guy named Lord Zordius, and he's kind of trying to consolidate power and the power vacuum at the end of the war. And so he's like, well, I can't have all these knights like running around. They're too organized. They're too much of a threat. And so he outlaws the knights and then orders the execution of Marquis Furnival, who's the protagonist's friend and mentor. And so then once he is killed, the knights disband and the protagonist is kind of left like aimless and wandering. And so his sister, Charlotte, well, they grew up in an orphanage together. So she's kind of like his adopted sister. And she's a student at the Royal Academy, and she wants to go to this town called Harlech, where there's all these ruins, so she can investigate the ancient city of Xanadu. And so she's like, well, come along with me and be my bodyguard. And so that's kind of what sets the stage. And it's very similar, like you mentioned, Alex, I think, to particularly like Weegraph and the Corpse Brigade in Final Fantasy Tactics. It's like the
Mm.
first thing I thought of on this playthrough, because you have that similar, like, oh, there's this warring kind of states, and then the knights are kind of once their usefulness is done, they're kind of just left to hung out to dry, and they're kind of, you're dealing with the ramifications of that in Final Fantasy Tactics. And now you're, as a protagonist here, you're also dealing with the same ramifications, which is just a really interesting setting for a story. It's very different than other Falcom game stories. And actually, Audra, I wanted to know if you had any thoughts about how this story kind of in the setup here kind of compares to other Falcom games since you've played quite a few of them.
Well, actually, if you play Ys versus Trails in the Sky, it
Hmm.
is pretty much the whole thing about Xanadu and the ruins and Harlech and Galsus. Like, that actually comes into, it's very much copied into that game, which I was amused by.
Oh, that's
Like, they do kind of a
interesting.
truncated, abridged version of it,
Oh,
which I
wow.
thought,
Yeah, see, that's one I've never played. The like, and if the listeners don't know, that's what the like fighting game
yeah.
basically with the E's and the Trails series, and there are other Falcom series I think brought in.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like cameos and support
yeah,
characters.
yeah. That's crazy. I didn't know that they kind of like reuse the
Yes,
plot.
Steve Bloom actually voices Galsus in that, which is kind of
Oh,
funny because
wow.
he does
Yeah,
a good
that's
job.
cool. Oh,
Yep.
that's pretty cool.
But I actually thought the plot was really interesting. I would have liked to have been able to like explore more of like a kind of fully fleshed out world with it. Or at least that's how I feel at the moment. I don't know how I feel at the end of the game, but yeah, it's like that's an interesting premise, especially for kind of it's a different take for Falcom than what they usually do.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And you're right, Audra. You really only get this really small slice of the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? The whole game takes place basically in Harlech, the town of Harlech and Harlech Island, and the ruins surrounding it. So the townspeople in town will maybe reference events that are happening outside, but other than that, you're not really involved in any of that. And a lot of the story, the story is so heavily lore based because a lot of it is conveyed through finding the tabulae and the memoirs, like we mentioned earlier, which are
Mm-hmm.
giving you the history of the ancient kingdom of Xanadu, and then how that's kind of coming back into the present. But that means that you're really just seeing this tiny sliver of
Of
the
the
world.
present day, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Though there are some some of the characters in the town do have some interesting connections to like other areas or other parts of the world, and little bits and pieces of kind of the world outside of this small town of people and in the ruins, which is kind of interesting. And it actually does the game does kind of have that trails quality to it, where you go into a town and you can talk to people, and then events will happen and you can go back and talk to everybody and they'll have different things to
Yeah.
say.
Mm.
And they're all named characters and
Hmm.
they have like their own little mini arcs or my dad wants me to be a fisherman and yeah.
Yeah, there's some interesting things like the
Mm,
townsfolk have said even so far. Like I remember one remarking that like, oh, like if you're dressed like that, like you're gonna get in trouble, like implying that like by wearing like the main character's still wearing like his knight's clothes, that like it's
mm-hmm.
gonna maybe like lead to like some persecution or some like bad events, which do kind of end up happening early on in the game. There's also like some other like talk that hasn't really, I don't know if it's gonna develop into anything, but I know like one of the NPCs in the item shop was just like, oh, this like shopkeeper is like really weird, right? Like I don't know if I trust him. And I'm like, oh, like I didn't get any bad vibes from him, but I guess we'll see if this develops into anything.
that is
So
that's a
Oh
very
yeah, the
keen
questionable
observation,
shopkeeper.
Alex.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that. Or he says like his eyes don't smile or something. Like
yeah,
or he
yeah.
always has the same weird smile whenever. Yeah, it was like a
Yeah, that was
nod.
it. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say he's not particularly villainous, but there is more going on with him. So that is a very good
Ah,
observation on your part. And we'll
Okay,
maybe
nice.
get into that in part two. Did you guys talk to the guy in the inn, Dusty?
yes, the one who his partner I guess was killed
Right,
Yeah,
by
the
this.
kind of like
Yeah,
cynic sounding
yeah,
dude. Yeah.
yeah. They
and he
were like
like
a
warms up to Shar later.
Yeah, yeah, they were like a pair of thieves, and so they were presumably trying to steal from the ruins, and his partner got caught by somebody and didn't have the best outcome from that. Which actually kind of it leads into what happens to the protagonist. So
Hmm.
you once you get to the island and get to town of Harlech, Charlotte goes and reserves you guys a room at the inn, and then she's like, okay, well, you should go explore some of the ruins, right, while I'm like doing that or whatever. And so you can go down into the back alley behind the town and go into what are called the back alley ruins, which really serve as basically like a tutorial. Here's what keys are, here's how you attack and fight, and there's a few enemies, bats and stuff like that in there. And then you get to the end of it and you open a chest and there's this crown in there. It's like, oh, okay, this is an interesting artifact, whatever. And then you go and like turn to take it to Charlotte so she can take a look at it. And then all of a sudden there's this knight there confronting you, and he basically whoops your butt
Yes.
and
Oh yeah.
leaves you there bleeding out and dying on the floor, which is not a very auspicious start to the
A grand
scholarly
adventure.
pursuits. Yeah,
Yeah.
not great. But luckily, Charlotte feels like you've been taking a long time, and she got some of the townspeople involved. And so, before you pass away, they come and find you and rescue you. And then that's when you meet, really, for the first time, Lise, who is the like shrine maiden, basically. And so she tells you, well, you've had this near death experience. Thankfully, we were able to get to you before you passed away. But because you're like just hanging on to life, the only way I can save your life is to bind you to a guardian. And so before this, you could talk to people in the town. And actually, I think the first time you go into the shrine, you actually see a woman bring in her baby and do like the guardian ceremony. I think. Do you guys remember that part?
Yes, because
Yeah.
it's like they attach a spirit to the baby, I
hmm
think,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
and
then
it's
So
like
that's supposed to like
everybody in
grow up
the
with you and protect you or something.
yeah, like
yeah.
everybody in this town has like a guardian assigned like around birth. And then like it's kind of like NPCs were talking about like how the guardian essentially like influences what path you'll take in life because it like
Oh yeah,
buffs
like
you in
someone
like a
said,
certain way essentially.
Yeah.
this
They
Yeah.
all
one's a
have.
miner because his is to like dig or something.
Yeah. They all the guardians like are associated with the different. They're kind of like saints in like Christian religion, right? They're all associated
uh,
with a different quality or a different, um, skill or aptitude. And so when people in Harlech are born, then they get form this like pact or bond with a guardian, and that kind of, like you guys are talking about, determines their role in life and also some of their strengths and helps them, safeguards them through their journey in life, right? And so because you've had this near death experience, you're essentially, I guess Lee's kind of says you're basically like a second chance at life or being born again, and then that allows her to perform the guardian ceremony on the protagonist, so that he can bond with the guardians. But because he's kind of in the state between life and death, that actually allows him to bond with multiple different guardians, if he so chooses. Which is a little bit, I guess it's a little like Persona, where you're
oh
bonded to
yeah,
the different personas.
I
So
mean,
you
pretty
are,
sweet deal. It's like a
yeah,
turning like a near death experience into like a super buff. Like pretty
yeah.
lucky for our main character.
It is lucky, but it's not completely lucky because she does tell you that unfortunately this state is temporary,
Yeah.
and your grip on life and your grip on the bond between you and the guardians is tenuous. And so if you are going to survive beyond whatever short temporary period that this will sustain you for, then you need to find the sacred sword called the Dragon Slayer, because I guess presumably the power of this sword will enable you to, restore your life force and bring you back to normal. So that then becomes kind of your motivation. You're still helping Charlotte, explore the ruins and bringing back artifacts and bits and pieces of the history of the kingdom to her. But now you have like this really overarching motivating goal to find the sword so that you don't die, basically. Which is kind of it's kind of a dark, kind of start for the game, but it is pretty compelling, I think, and interesting. You also have this kind of, you were mentioning now earlier, Alex, that like the guardians are kind of setting your path in life, and I think this game kind of has that theme of like destiny and your
Mhm.
your role in life being determined by your birth and without your say in it, right? And like how people kind of try to resist that, um,
Yeah, a
becomes
lot
like
of
a.
the NPC dialogue in the town is even about that. It's just like, oh, the
Mhm,
hmm
most like valuable thing in life is just like knowing what you're doing, like knowing
mhm,
your goal, yeah, your purpose.
yeah,
she's
yeah,
kind of considering the main character as adrift at first. That's an interesting
yes,
narrative element. Yeah.
yeah, that he's kind of looking for purpose, and he comes to this place where everyone kind of has their purpose set out for them at birth, and that's a very important part of their like culture and history. But also you get the sense too that it's maybe a limiting factor, right? There's
hmm
Yeah.
people who maybe are kind of stifled by that, or people who are kind of trying to get away from it or reject it, and what that means for your own protagonist and their story, and what it means for the history of the kingdom of Xanadu and the future of Harlech and the world as it is, which is, I think, is a really cool, kind of setting and world building that they've done. The narrative in this game, I think, is relatively sparse, but I think it's very economical with how it's presented.
Mm.
Like Characters, you know, even when you talk to them, they don't have a lot of lines of dialogue, but everything always has some sort of purpose or kind of connects to something else. And so, over like repeated interactions with people and little bits and pieces of lore that you get throughout the game, you kind of end up with this pretty interesting, you know, kind of tapestry of the history of this kingdom and kind of interesting little narrative bits and things to think about. And I think too, you know, you have it does choose to have like this silent protagonist, right? You're a protagonist. He's unnamed. You get to name him, but he's unnamed. Nobody they'll refer to you by whatever name you pick, but you know, he doesn't really. He has this set
Least
backstory, but he's
calls him
kind of
Sir Knight,
yes,
which I find
yes,
funny.
yes. And he's kind of like a blank slate in a lot of ways, right? But I think they kind of tie that in really well with the narrative, and so he feels like more of a character, I think, in a lot of ways than a lot of other, you know, silent protagonists like Link and Zelda or whoever. I mean, even sometimes I think in some ways he feels a little more fleshed out than at all in the Ys series.
Yes,
Um,
especially early game at all.
yeah, yeah, which is kind of cool and kind of gives it a different feel than Falcom's, you know, big action RPG series, which I think is important because it really makes it stand on its own and feels unique and feels different, and um, that's really, I think, kind of what makes the game interesting,
I
and would
agree.
be interesting to people who like ease but want something a little different.
Yeah, and for me, a
um,
big part of
oh
like
yeah, go ahead.
the early intrigue is just like Dvorak, the mysterious knight. Like because when
Yes.
he first confronts you, like he recognizes your knight's garb, but he also like mistakes you for a thief.
Mhm.
And like you also get like a sense that he's kind of like from these ruins, like maybe even like protecting them. And
Uh,
so like the way he attacks you is maybe like done by mistake. So it's like it kind of like I got the impression pretty early on that like he's not actually like a villainous character, which leaves me kind of wondering like who the villain of this game will come to be because maybe I'm misreading Dvorak, but my impression is that he's a pretty cool dude with a cool mustache.
he does have an
No,
awesome mustache.
yeah, no, that is a very good point, Alex. Like he kind of mistakenly thinks you're there as a thief, and he also, you get some hints too from like his dialogue, his manner of speech. He doesn't sound like the other characters in Harlex, so it's like, oh, is this guy like from here? Is he, you know, he has kind of an more old school traditional way of speaking. So you also get the sense it's like this guy doesn't really feel like the other characters, right?
Yeah,
And that he may be coming from a different time, different place. And then you do have that kind of case of mistaken identity where he has an antagonistic relationship to the player, but maybe not an antagonistic role in the story. And so, yeah, you kind of learn a little bit more about him. And then there's a few other characters that are kind of related to him that I think we will get to a few of in this part one. But you know, that are kind of related to, you know, the history of the kingdom and everything. But yeah, Dvorak is an interesting character. He also kind of serves like as the rival,
yeah,
in a lot of ways, for the protagonist. But it's not a traditional rival. You know, he's not like the same age or the same background as the protagonist. He's much older, more experienced, and so it's kind of a different take than even like Audra, you know, like Chester and Adol have
Yeah.
in Oath and Felgana. This is a lot different than that, even.
No, actually, I thought he was an interesting character, and I do like some of the later reveals or hintings that they do with him. This one.
Yeah, yeah, he has some cool moments of his own
Mm.
later in the game, that's for sure. But there is one other major character I want to talk about before we move on, and that's Agnes. So she is a treasure hunter that you run into while you're investigating, you know, the ruins, and I think you have a funny interaction with her early on where like she needs to get in this place, but there's a bunch of monsters, and then you clear them out, and then she'll like you know, if you leave and come back, she'll be there, and she's like, "Oh wow, you did such a great job clearing out those monsters. We should be partners." And then
Hmm.
she's like, "You do all the fighting, and then I'll come up and get the riches when you're done."
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah,
And
she
then she'll
seems like the
sell them
kind
to
of
you.
person Dvorak would actually want to kill.
Yes, yes. Yeah, she's there not for the right reasons. You're there for like scholarly pursuit. She's there for like trying to find something valuable and get rich quick. And you'll come across her a couple times like looking at different elements of the environment and being like, "Oh man, I wonder how easily I could take this with me and how much money I'd get for it."
Mhm. And then she's always willing to sell you stuff.
Yes, yes. And that's actually ends up being pretty important because she will come across like rare items that you can't get otherwise. So anytime you see her, you always want to talk to her, and ask if she has any special items because she'll sell you sometimes like stat boosters, sometimes important items that will be useful for throughout the game.
Like
Like
the
one of the
bone
first
carving
things.
knife.
Yes, yes. And you go ahead, Audra. You elaborate on what that is and why it's important.
Basically, monster bones can be used to create keys. So you either sell them back to the merchant to keep the supply and demand balance so that they don't get over inflation, I guess, with the
Mhm.
key prices. Or you can actually use the bone carving knife and craft your own keys.
Yeah. And I think that's a really cool kind of unique mechanic that this game has. I've never seen that in any other game where, monsters will drop this resource that you can like turn into keys that you can use in any space. And some,
Mhm.
chests will sometimes give you keys. You can get keys dropped from destroying boxes or from enemies and stuff like that. But there's always like tons of locked doors and they all use the same type of key, but you're always basically needing more. And so you're given like this kind of interesting risk reward mechanic, like you were talking about, Audra, where you have this kind of economy and you can buy keys from the shop, but if you buy keys, the price goes up,
Mhm.
because Spence, the shopkeeper, realized, oh, there's demand, there's demand for these keys.
Yes.
I can, I
And then you
can,
have to
From this
sell
one
him back
customer.
bones.
yeah.
And yep.
Yep, yep.
It
And
is
so you, oh no, go ahead, Alex.
I mean, like it is a cool mechanic. Like at first I thought it was like a really neat idea. Like in the long run so far, it has gotten like a little frustrated because like some parts of this world have like just locked door after locked door after locked door. Some of
Yes.
them have
Mhm.
like kind of long spaces without any locked doors. So you're not really ever sure how many keys you want for your kind of like next excursion out of the town. So ideally you just want to like take as many keys as possible, but if you're having like a really good run and the reason you have to like turn back to town is because you just ran out of these damn keys, can be a little frustrating.
I agree. I did have a few times, especially early on, where I was like, oh no.
Yeah, yeah, no, and especially early, the key economy, like it's difficult for you to get a lot of keys at once. Like you don't have a lot of money, and so you can't buy that many keys at once. You're probably not killing a ton of monsters, so bones aren't dropping that regularly. And so you don't really have a lot of ways to get keys. So at the beginning, it can be kind of
And then you
frustrating.
have to backtrack because you usually don't have the money for like the black onyx or the.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And you do eventually get an artifact that'll just teleport you directly to town.
Yeah,
And
you
it's
do get
like,
that pretty early on
mhm,
actually.
yeah,
But yeah, you still like if you run out of keys and you're like far in, then
You
you're
have
yeah.
to
just got
go
to go
back and
back
then
Because
you
you got
have
and
to
to
trudge all
go.
the way
Yeah.
back. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
and maybe like a shortcut was just like a couple locked doors away, and it's like, God damn it.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But
It
it
does.
is neat. I like how it's unique and it adds its own flavor to the game at the same
Hmm.
time as it can be a
Mhm.
little frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually, Mina the Hollower, I don't know if you guys have been playing that, but
Not yet.
that game
I
has a
have heard
similar
much.
mechanic where there are
Oh.
these keys. They're called are they, oh, it's like they're gear keys and they have like a specific name for it that combines the word gear and key, but I can't remember exactly how it's said. But yeah, it has these gear keys that you can find in the environment or you can buy from the shop. And so a bunch of locked doors all around the world are these, keys. And so you kind of have to manage, like, do I want to spend my bone, the resource there is bones, which kind of work like souls in a souls game. It's like, do I
Hmm.
want to amass these bones to level up, or do I want to use them to buy keys so I can progress further in the world? And so it has that kind of interesting thing. And I was like, I've been playing it recently while we were also playing this for the podcast. And I was like, oh wow, like I wonder if they have played this game before, because it's not that common of a mechanic, but to see it show up there, it's like, oh yeah, like maybe they had a little bit of inspiration from this game. But I do think it's an interesting, like, it kind of adds to that sense of like preparation, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's the kind of the key difference between Xanadu Next and a lot of Falcom's other RPGs, particularly their action RPGs. Is in those games it's a lot more about like technical, like skill execution, right? Like dodging, jumping,
Hmm.
blocking, parrying, things like that. In the ease games in particular, it's much more focused on kind of that kind of skill expression. And this game is a lot slower paced. The combat's a lot slower and more weighty. You're also not able to move around as quickly, because either you're controlling your character with the mouse, and that's just not as fluid, or even if you are using a controller, which you can do with this game, it's just you're not that fast, right? And you don't have a dodge move of any kind,
Yeah.
so you kind of have to just kind of like lumber out of the way of attacks if you want to get away. So I think in that context, like your preparations before battle actually end up being way more important than even maybe the exact actions you take in a battle. Like what skills you have equipped, how you've what equipment you have on, and like how you've distributed your stats. And I think the keys kind of are a similar thing, but for the exploration, right? So you want to make sure that you're amassing enough resources, preparing well, so that when you go out into the environment, you're ready for what's going to come next. And I like how that element of the combat and the exploration kind of reinforce each other in that way. I don't know, but I agree with you guys too that it can be frustrating at times, and you get that kind of like Souls run back effect a little bit with it, where when you're like going from a bonfire to a boss kind of thing, you
Yeah,
get that a little
practicing
bit.
dodging enemies. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, because like another thing we were talking about a bit before the show was just like the way like kind of progressing through areas feels like there's just like with enemy types, like once you unlock a new enemy type, you'll usually like really feel it. Like either it's gonna like do like an obscene amount of damage to you, or you're going to be like doing like no damage to it, and it's like basically the game telling you like go get yourself like some new equipment.
Mhm.
And like to do that, go grind a little bit, maybe like fight a little some enemies that you can kill a little bit faster, which increases the rate at which you can grind, which increases the rate at which you can get money. Then you return to town, like gear up a little bit more, and then usually just getting like one new piece of like weaponry or armor, like, and you're good to go like for the next enemy type. So it's like very kind of like telegraphed like difficulty spikes that are all
Mhm.
attached to like your gear, which are also like attached to like your leveling. So it all works like very fluidly. But the fact that like kind of like there's just one resource and that's used for like recovery items, keys, and gear, like it can like, yeah, it really puts a lot of emphasis on like how you decide to prepare. But like because of that reason, I found myself always prioritizing equipment and like just using the rest of my money on keys and like kind of just not bothering with like recovery items at all, essentially. I don't know how you guys kind of approached it.
I tried to hoard as many recovery items as I could, basically, and the gear was pretty much the top. I feel like with the monster bones, I kind of just kept the carving knife on me and hoped I could make some more.
Yeah, well, I think you bring up some good points. Both of you do, and I think this is a good way to start talking about like the skills that you can learn from weapons and equipment, and the guardians too,
Mm.
and kind of how those play in. So, yeah, I totally agree, Alex. Like you're kind of it's kind of this really what I find to be a satisfying loop where you're going out, you're pushing a little bit further in the dungeon, encountering an enemy or an obstacle that you don't have the means to fully overcome yet, going back to town, seeing if there's anything new you can buy, seeing if you can stock up on healing items or keys or anything, and then going back out and making another attempt. And there are ways of kind of making that, a little easier for yourself depending on, what your strategy or preferences are. And that's through the skills and the guardians, right? So, we talked a little bit about the guardians' narrative purpose before, but we didn't really talk about their gameplay purpose too much. And so, how these work is essentially they're like a equipable, passive equipable um, thing to your character, and you find out in the world when you're exploring these cards, and you bring the card back to Lise and the shrine, and then she can bind that card to you, and then you have the benefits of that guardian. And so the guardians do all kind of things. Some of them raise your HP or the amount of skill uses you have. Because each skill, you don't have a mana pool, you have a number of skill uses, just like Dark Souls does with like pyromancy or something like that. You can use a skill a certain number of times before it's depleted, and you have to rest to recover it. And it's the same thing here. You also have like more esoteric kind of benefits. So things like may increase your magic damage. You may have guardians that increase your item drop rates from enemies, or your proficiency gains with weapons. So how quickly you learn the skill from a weapon,
There's
or other
even
things
one
like that.
for discounts, which I thought
Yes,
was amusing.
yes. Yeah, one of the guardians will give you a boost to charisma, which will cut the price in shops. And then, so, all the prices in the shop will go down. And then all the guardians also level up just like your character. So as you defeat enemies and gain experience, your character levels up, and then the guardians also level up, and that makes their effects more potent. So you can, depending on which kind of guardians you favor, that can kind of mitigate some of these things that we've been talking about, right? So if you're finding you're not getting a lot of keys or a lot of bones to make keys, you can equip the guardian that increases drops from enemies, and then that'll help. Or you can, if you find that you're a little too like physically weak, or you lose health too quickly, you can boost your health, or you can boost some of your other parameters using the guardians. But it's always a trade-off, right? Because you can only equip one. So you kind of have to pick and choose which one you want to use. And then there's a strategy that goes into like, well, do I want to use a guardian that's powerful but is already max level and can't level up anymore, or do I want to level up some of these other guardians
And
that I
see what
haven't
they
used
can
as
do.
much?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you guys feel about the guardian system?
I liked it. I basically put one in until it levels up, and then I just keep switching them out just to see what effects they have and which ones I like more.
Mm.
I think the one I either like the potion, doubling the effects of potions
Hmm.
just for survivability, or the magic attack one was a big help during a boss fight.
Yeah,
Y-
yeah.
Yeah, for me it's the magic attack one, like the sorcerer one, or the cat one, which gives you extra
Oh
skill
yes.
uses. Those are my two
Mm.
favorites by far.
Yeah, those are both very useful. I actually prefer Durandal, which is the one that increases your weapon skill proficiency gains, because it can take a long time in a lot of combat to learn the skills from weapons, and at a certain point you'll start getting like enough weapons that you have more weapons, like you have a bunch of weapons at once, and they have a bunch of different skills you might want to acquire. But the pace of it is so slow, so I found that
Hmm.
he is really useful because it's like, oh, I can get more skills, and that means I have more tools in my toolbox, right? So
Mm.
then I can have more options for like addressing different combat scenarios or things like that. um, and that's kind of why I preferred him. And then also the dwarf one, who does item drops, because that can be very very helpful. Because while you can buy a lot of equipment, and actually probably most equipment in the game is purchased from the shop, you can also sometimes get equipment from enemies, and he will boost the drop rate of basically when enemies get killed, a chest will drop, and then there might be a reward inside. A lot of times it's just money, but they can drop like useful items and equipment, and that can be anything from like spell books to teach you new spells, or weapons or armor. And so that is also really useful because if you get the weapon from an enemy drop, then you don't have to buy it. And that's like the main draw, like pulling from your money is like saving up to buy equipment. And then that frees up, your money for other things.
Yes,
uh,
Okay, I don't think I
getting
found that one
magic
yet,
through the
but sounds
chests
good.
is great.
Yes, yeah, getting the magic. Yeah, finding magic and not having to buy it yourself because the magic books are really expensive.
Everything's
Um,
really expensive.
yeah. Yeah, no, it is. And Alex, when you were talking earlier about like having to prep and you mentioned Vagrant Story, like I think this game hits a nice balance. Like that's the thing people complain about with Vagrant Story a lot because you have to have like multiple different types of weapons with damage types, right?
Yeah.
To deal with certain enemies. And so people are like, oh, I've got to have like 3 different weapons and swap between them all the time, and that gets really annoying. And this game isn't quite that strict with like making you pair damage types to enemies or things like that, but it's just enough that it like keeps you on your toes sometimes and makes you rethink your approach.
I
So
mean,
I think
I personally love that system in Vagrant Story. I think
yeah,
it's a
no, I
lot of
do
fun.
too. I do too. I do too. I love that game, but I know that is like a big sticking point for people, and this has a little bit of that, but it doesn't go all the way into that.
Yeah.
Which I think is it makes it interesting and gives it a little bit of bite, but maybe not quite as rigorous as that system, which
Well, the
is
fact
Yeah.
that you can master skills is pretty
Mhm.
fun too.
Yeah, and I guess we haven't talked too much about that. So when you all the weapons have a particular skill associated with them, and when you reach 100% proficiency, which you just do by using the weapon against enemies, then you can actually use that skill without equipping the weapon. And you
Mhm.
have 4 skill slots on your character, and some of the skills are like physical attack skills, like thrusting, swing your sword in a wide arc, things like that that'll hit multiple enemies, but the majority of them are actually like passive skills. And so some of the most interesting skills in the game are the passive skills you get from different weapons. Things that increase the amount of money you get. Some passive skills will increase certain skill parameters, like stat parameters you have, or they
You can
might
see the stats of the
yeah,
enemies, which I found
yeah,
helpful.
yeah, which is really helpful. Yeah, you can see their exact, like you always have a health bar when you fight an enemy, but if one of the passive skills lets you see the actual number of health they have and then
Mm.
all of their weaknesses,
hmm
which is very useful.
It's like having constant Libra.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And this system is kind of something. Now, I haven't played Final Fantasy 9, but I've heard that this Final
Oh,
Fantasy
big
9 has a
time.
similar. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and as someone who does not enjoy that system in Final Fantasy IX, I'm not the biggest fan of it here. Like I do appreciate how the game gives you like a we were just talking about them. The guardian that can like
mhm.
boost your proficiency gain like a little bit, but I mean that's such a boring choice compared to some of the other guardians, so I'm not going to be equipping that. Yeah, I just like I just never loved that system in FF9 because it is like inherently grindy. It like asks you to like deliberately nerf yourself just so you can learn more skills. And like I'm also like not going to not learn the skills because I feel like I have to. But what I do appreciate that this game added to that is that as you're raising proficiency, it's also going to raise the attack power of your weapon. So you're not actually by holding yourself back from the next good weapon you've got a little longer, you're not actually nerfing yourself that bad because your attack power is scaling with the way that you're leveling towards that skill to learn permanently. So I appreciate that at least that makes it a little bit less frustrating to kind of just hold on to a weapon you don't want to be using anymore.
Yeah, and I think the game's approach to weapons does remind me a lot of like the Souls series, where weapons aren't really as disposable as something as in like Diablo, for example. Each weapon, because it has this unique skill associated with it, even though they do like have tiers of like how strong they are or whatever, and some of them will become useless over time because they're just not strong enough. Each weapon kind of, when you find a new weapon, it feels really impactful, right? Like,
Hmm.
oh, this is like not, this isn't just a new sword that's stronger than the last one, but it's also like confers this other benefit that I can get from using it that's more meaningful than just a pure strength bonus or whatever, right? And so it does make the equipment very rewarding when you're exploring and you find something. I think, which is kind of nice, and it's also like I really like the variety in the skills you can get. So we talked
Yeah,
about a few of them, but
the
you
skills
also
are fun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like too that you're really limited in how many skills you can have. So only 4. So there you get such a large number of skills from the various weapons that it makes for some really hard choices, I think, when you're like approaching a situation and like, oh man, what skill do I want to have? Like, and then your magic spells also compete for those same slots. So it's like, do I want to equip a magic spell so I can have some range damage and some magic damage, or do I want to have these passive bonuses that make my character stronger or more defensive or whatever? And so I was always constantly like swapping around my skills, depending on how the situation called for. I don't know how you guys felt. Did you guys have that same experience or?
I usually I'd switch between like one of the um, passive skills depending on the situation. Usually like an elemental if I could get one of the elemental boosts from it.
Mhm.
Then I'd have 2 magics and 1 physical attack. And it kind of just depended on which ones I was used to at that point. Like right now I'm practicing with Cyclone, which
Yeah,
is
that's a really
yeah.
good one. Yeah, because you can hit like it's really. I feel like dealing with groups in this game can be pretty hard
Mm-hmm.
because if you have more than one enemy on you at one time, they can kind of gang up on you.
Mm.
And this is something we hadn't talked about either. That positioning is very important in the combat, right?
Yes.
So if you're hitting an enemy from the side or from the back, you do additional damage, but that applies also to the enemies towards you. So if they get behind you, they're going to do a lot more damage to you than if they're in front of you. And so when you have multiple enemies on you at once, one, you can't move very fast and you can't get away very quickly. And so they can kind of get you in a corner and be attacking you from all sides, and you can go down really, really quickly. So those physical skills like Cyclone, like you were saying, Audra, where you can hit a lot of enemies at once and also has like a knockback effect, is really, really
Yes.
useful.
Knockback is
Um,
also very good.
yeah. Because a lot of times it's just like keeping enemies kind of at bay, right? Is a lot of what
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to do. Or crowd control. There's other spells later that'll give you some kind of crowd control, freeze enemies, or
Or you
hold
can
them in
like just
place.
try to like if they're like kind of slow, like those zombie enemies, you can
Hmm.
try to like get them all in a line and then just like zap them like with lightning.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like yeah, it's like the positioning in this game is honestly probably my favorite part. Like one uh skill that I always have equipped is the passive that gives you bonus damage for attacking from behind.
Hmm.
Just because that's like the part of the game I enjoy most. I enjoy like meeting like a new enemy type or like group of enemies, trying to like get their like attacks down, getting around them, and then like getting those crits, and like the sound effect of like getting like a crit is like so good with those back attacks, and it's like
Hmm.
some of the most fun I've had with this like kind of style of ARPG combat.
There's like a
S-
strategy layer to it too.
yeah, exactly.
The
So it's just like
positioning.
every
Mm-hmm.
room with like the specific composition of enemies, you can like think of ways to like try to like position around them, get them into like groups for like maximizing damage with them. Like it gives you like a lot of variety. And yeah, for that reason, like I also like kind of balance a physical skill, a magical skill, and then like another magic or just 2 passives. Always the bonus crit damage though.
Yeah. That is a very good point, Alex. And I think you guys are both. I think it's interesting. You guys kind of have different approaches to the combat, but um, that you kind of each found your own way to like make it interesting
It
and make
proves
it
how
fun.
versatile it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the skills that I've had equipped like the whole time is early on in the game you get this axe that gives you this skill called plunder that increases the amount of money that drops from enemies,
Oh
and I
yes.
just have that equipped at all times
I did
because
too for like the first 5 hours, yeah.
yeah, because it just you always need money. Money is like the most important resource in this game.
But
So
again, like the
um,
proficiency guardian, it's such a boring choice.
yeah, but it's
But
useful,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
it's like
Yeah.
you nerf yourself a little bit
Mhm.
to like help your progression. So I
Yeah.
definitely understand it from that angle.
And then when I'm gonna fight, I know there's gonna be a lot of combat. I'll take it off real quick and put
Yeah.
other things on there. But yeah, and there's another one I like is there's a so most of the weapons in the game are one handed, but some of the more powerful weapons are two handed. But there's one of the passive skills you get later actually allows you to equip a two handed sword or weapon in one hand and then still have the shield. So that's one I like too because you're not. It's kind of taking away that trade off
Mm.
from equipping like one of the more powerful weapons, which is cool. Um, and then also there's three skills that'll give you like a magic effect to your weapon, either lightning, fire, or ice. And those are also really useful because there's a lot of enemies that are more vulnerable to magic damage, or in fact can only be killed by magic damage, particularly the undead enemies in the game. But if you have one of those equipped, then you don't need to have a spell equipped because hitting them with your magically infused weapon will kill them, just like a spell would, which is really cool. But yeah, I like that everybody has a different approach to the kind of skill setup, and um, I will say I do think one way that this game and on paper seems like it would have a lot of variety is that it does allow you every time you level up, you get to allocate your stats in different areas, right? In the different, put points in different stats. And so you'd think from the big outset, like, oh, well, this means I can make a kind of character build. But in reality, because the stat requirements for equipment kind of drive how you're going to put your
Mm.
stats, I kind of feel like
Yes.
most people don't really have a character build. They just put their points in to make sure they can equip the next piece of equipment they have. Because that's how I play for sure. Like, and that you end up putting points, like making a balanced character because of that, right? And I don't know how you guys felt about that, but um,
I think I kind of had the same approach. Just you look at the equipment more and then you're like, okay.
Yeah, I mean the
yeah, yeah, and
equipment differences are so drastic that I can't even imagine it's like viable unless you're
mhm.
deliberately nerfing yourself to play another way to not just like level up stats according to equipment, which seems so like deliberately like spread out. Like it's just like, oh, with this level I can level up towards this next piece of equipment. Like it seems like very linear and straightforward to the extent that like if I wasn't doing that, would I like just basically be a much worse character? Like I can't imagine anything else.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree, Alex. And you kind of get the impression at first, like, oh, well, maybe I can buy a bunch of spells and then focus on being like a spellcaster. But in reality, there's not really that many benefits to doing that when you can pretty much get access to magic by making a well-rounded character. And then if you were doing that and putting all your points into like intellect and mind, you would be getting more spell uses and more powerful spells, but you'd be cutting yourself off from like all of the equipment. And like you said, that's really how you're going to increase your survivability. That's where you're going to get all of your new like skills and stuff from. So it just doesn't really like make sense to make a different type of character
Yeah.
than the kind of well-rounded one. Yeah. Which I think is kind of a flaw. I mean, it does. I will say it is. I think it is very satisfying, like that progression loop of like, oh, I need to put points into these stats so I can use this next thing. You always have a carrot to chase,
Yeah.
but every character, I think, between people's playthroughs are going to end up feeling very similar, at least in their stat spread,
Well, yeah,
because
because
of
the
that.
way like Souls iterates on this, because it's very much the same thing with Souls, is just like by offering more equipment variety,
Mhm.
and like diversity and like different weapon types you can build towards, which require different like skills or stats to invest in. But that variety just isn't really here, at least not in the first half of the game. It's very much just like here's your next piece of equipment, level up towards
Mhm.
those stats. Does there become kind of like more diversity later on, or still not really?
No, I mean it pretty
Okay.
much has that same structure throughout the whole game, which I think, like I said, it does motivate you to keep going for the next piece of equipment, and then also like the levels become important because you're like, oh, I'm cut off from this equipment until I level up, so I really need to level up so I can put the stats in the correct put the points in the correct stats.
Yeah.
But there's never really like build variety like you would get in a Souls game. That
Seems
just
like it's
doesn't really
more
exist here.
skill variety.
Yeah,
Would be
yeah, yeah, exactly. Which is, I mean, it's still interesting and still makes like the playthrough, your individual playthrough, I think has enough variety to keep it interesting, but it doesn't have, I think, the same maybe degree of replayability that a Souls game does, where you're making vastly different characters between runs. It just doesn't really support that. But it's still, an interesting system, and this of course was made in 2005, so it's well before the Soul series would
Oh
would
yeah,
hit the
yeah, I know.
scene. And yeah. But I do think it's interesting that they're hitting on some of the same ideas, but they just don't quite get to where like From Software got with it. um, but that actually leads into an interest into the level design, I think, right, where I think this game is really, I think this is maybe the aspect where the game is the most ahead of its time, is in the level design, and the interconnectedness of the environments. So, Alex or Audra, if either one of you wants to kind of talk about that aspect of the game, feel free.
Like we were talking about, like you started at the town, and there are like after you complete the tutorial area, there's essentially the first region you can access, the Clover Ruins, which has kind of, it's like the levels are very much kind of like divided into like small, mostly like kind of like rectangular screens with these different combat or puzzle setups that again reminded me very much of kind of how Vagrant Story is designed its levels.
Hmm.
But there are like some good amount of like kind of branching paths, so there's like a good sense of like exploration in the, not as much in the first level, but in the second level there starts being like little environmental puzzles where like you'll flick a switch in one area and unlock like more stuff in another area. And as you're traversing through these different levels, you'll start unlocking like shortcuts that will just lead back into town. And so, in that sense, it's very much reminded me of like playing Dark Souls 1, and like going through like a couple of levels, and then suddenly I'm like circle back to like Firelink Shrine or something. And I'm like, oh, snap. So that's the way like this world is connected. So yeah, this game feels like it's kind of like building the bones of what Dark Souls would essentially do so well.
And I also
Yeah.
love the fact that you can even go to certain areas, and at first you're like, I wonder why it even this is designed this way, and then you'll be able to enter it from a different angle
Hmm.
later on, and you'll have like a special item that'll allow you to like see hidden stairs or jump across like lava. And it really just opens up the game, I think.
Yeah, and that's kind of like those Metroidvania or Zelda-like
Hmm.
elements where it's just like you're just like, oh, what's this like sparkly gap? Like, I guess I can't
Yes.
cross this now. And then you get the item that lets you cross the sparkly gap. So it's like, okay, here's another way that these areas connect. So yeah,
I
that's
am
all good
waiting
stuff.
for the underwater one.
Yes, yes. You've seen that hallway in
Yes.
the Eternal
Hmm.
Maze where
Yeah.
there's a big pool of water.
Saw it and drowned in it first.
Yeah, and that's another way too. I think it reminds me of Dark Souls, is like there's a lot of, in areas when you get there, there's a lot of paths open to you, and there's nothing really preventing you sometimes from entering into a path you're not actually ready for yet.
Like a dead
Um,
end, yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
or an area that you're just like not strong enough to go through. So you might take a, like, especially at the beginning of the game, you get out into the Clover Ruins from Harlech Village, and then if you go left, there's a bunch of goblins there, but the goblins are way too
Oh
strong for
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Gotta
so
fight more
you
of those slimes.
Yep, yep. And there's a few points like that in the game where you can get to places, and then that you're like, oh wait, yeah, I'm not ready for this. Yeah, I'm not ready for this
Yep.
yet. But I really like how, especially these first three dungeon areas, the Clover Ruins, the Eternal Maze, and then Eaglet Mountain, are all so interconnected. And there's multiple points where you can exit one and enter the other one. Um, and they make the world feel so cohesive, just like you were saying, Alex, with like the Firelink Shrine and how everything is kind of built around that, and you always find yourself going back to that. um, I think they do a really, really great job here of like having these areas connect to each other and very realistically and logically connect to one another. And so even if you can't get to a certain spot, you can kind of see how you might go through a different area and then find the entrance to that other part of the dungeon that you can see but you
Yeah.
can't access yet.
Mhm.
Um, which I think is just a really I think it's very difficult to make area design like that. But I think it's very important for any dungeon crawler to have that kind of really unique and compelling design that naturally propels you along and makes you, want to poke at the seams and see how you can advance. And this game just really, really nails that in a way that I think doesn't feel maybe as artificial as some other games do, even though, like you were saying, there a lot of the rooms are kind of that rectangular or square shape. um and maybe with like two or three different corridors off of it and maybe locked doors or whatever. There is a lot of that, but I think they do a really good job of like mixing those things together and kind of connecting them to each other in a way that makes the world feel very cohesive, which is, I think, really cool. And one of the things that makes this game stand out. And I swear to God, FromSoft must have played this game before designing
Yeah.
the world in Dark Souls. Like, there are like Kingsfield 4 is also has kind of a similar interconnected design, so it's not like they weren't doing it before, but it's just so similar in some parts, like especially the verticality, I think, in this game. Like where you're going up to different floors of certain dungeons, and then that's letting you off into the mountain, and then you take an elevator down
Yep.
back to like Harlech.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, this is so Firelink Shrine. Like
Or
there's
like taking the stairs up from like a side path in Eternal Maze
Mhm.
and then ending up back in the town. So yeah, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. It's just so I think if people are listening to this and they really like that aspect of Dark Souls and they miss that the other games kind of abandon that, then definitely you should try out this game, because that is like maybe one of the most defining aspects, I think, of the level design here is just how connected everything is. I will say in the latter half, they do kind of get away from that as they try to take you to these more thematically and like narratively important locations. Things are kind of not as interconnected anymore, which is also kind of like Dark Souls. And you do get a teleport too.
Yes, the
Um,
teleport is very
mhm.
helpful.
Yeah, which is also like traveling between bonfires in Dark Souls. So that also, I think, maybe is part of why the game becomes less interconnected. Is that now they have this ability for you to teleport between areas, so it's not as important for everything to loop it back around on each other.
That's
But
exactly like Dark Souls.
yes. Yes, yes, it is. It is very similar. But I do think like doing this kind of level design in 2005 is just like very ahead of its time, and is not something that you see from a lot of action RPGs like this. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, like especially for like a Diablo style
mhm,
ARPG where like procedural generation is usually such a big part of the design. Like here, just like that's a big reason why I've been able to get into this game a lot more than other ARPGs is because of that interconnectivity, that sense of like going through a world and not just like another like procedurally generated dungeons with like repetitive challenges, you know what I mean?
mhm.
Like
Hmm.
there's repetition in terms of like having to eventually like go back to the town and then like get more equipment and then head back out again, but I think that's very different from just like kind of exploring those more procedurally dependent dungeons.
Yeah, I totally agree, Alex. You definitely, when all the areas have this like handcrafted feel to them, and they feel a lot like a Zelda dungeon, right? Like, this idea, oh, there's a puzzle here that I'm going to have to solve to progress, or you always know you're anticipating that there's going to be something interesting ahead because it all feels like somebody really put this together in a really logical and intentional way. And I agree with you. Like Diablo, everything just kind of blurs together because of the procedural generation, right? Like you don't really get a sense of these locations and spaces
Hmm.
because it all just turns into like this mush. Like I recently went to see that movie The Backrooms, and I feel like the like a lot of procedural generated games, they kind of feel like that, right? Where you're it doesn't make any sense. Like all these things are just kind of like half remembered things grafted onto each other. And that's how I feel like about Diablo dungeons, right? Like, and then you may get to a boss, or there may be set elements that are like put in the middle of those procedurally generated dungeons. But all of that stuff kind of just is very unmemorable, and it just kind of falls around you. It doesn't stick with you. Whereas here, I think the areas, like, they're so memorable because there's so much intentionality behind their design, and you can remember like specific rooms and specific enemy placements and puzzles and things like that. And so it just feels really I just think it has a bigger impact on the player, and
Mm.
kind of is pulling from that like Zelda thing too, where you're always like, oh, what's the next room going to bring me? What's the new thing I'm going to see here? And that is a much more compelling, I think, style of design than just like endless slop.
Yeah. I'll
Yeah.
admit I pushed myself to go further than I probably should have sometimes just to see what was next.
Yeah, just to see like what
Yeah.
cool things around the corner, right? Yeah, yeah. But I think too, like we're in this kind of with like AI, and there's also been a big rise with like action RPGs, particularly with the like roguelite action RPGs, I almost feel like we're kind of in the slop era a little bit of like, not that I love a lot of those kind of games, and I'm a big like roguelike fan. So I'm not saying procedural generation is always bad, but it's really refreshing to play a game like this where you it you're it's not just a bunch of like random stuff thrown together. Like, when you enter a location or enter a place, that there's going to be something intentional and interesting there. And I think that's something that you can get from this game that you don't always get from modern games, and I think makes it worth playing now or going back to um, you know today. Even though it's
Yeah.
old and it looks kind of, bad and stuff like that in some ways. But uh, yeah, do you want to expand on that, Alex?
Yeah, I was like, this would definitely be too much to ask for of a game of this time. But I think like one thing that definitely could have like elevated the world design another level is just like a bit more environmental storytelling. And like
Mm-hmm.
I know like that's like would be a thing to be like developed more along with like Demon Souls and whatnot. But just like this is a world that like in the lore textbooks and stuff we find around is like depicted and like described to have like a very like rich history behind it. But like you don't really get that sense like going through like these different rooms of like the specific like events that might have transpired here. So I
Mm-hmm.
think just like even just a little more towards that would have been really cool. But yeah, that's still fine that it doesn't have it.
Yeah, like a sense of place, you're saying, right? Where like
Yeah.
you get a sense of like what it was before it was like a abandoned dungeon and monsters
Mm-hmm.
were living in it, kind of thing, you
Yeah.
mean? Yeah, yeah. And I agree with you. Like, when I say that everything is designed like really intentionally, I would say it's like designed intentionally for a gameplay purpose. It
Yes.
doesn't necessarily feel like a real place that people lived in before and then has been abandoned. But that would go a long way to making it feel more authentic, right? And giving you a better sense of like what the society or the people of Xanadu were like. Because I do agree, like, you don't really get a sense of that other than through the tabulae and the memoirs. You get a little bit of that, but that's all conveyed through text. You don't actually see a lot of what their kind of lifestyle or society or culture was like, and that is a bit of a missed opportunity for
It
sure.
I did find it funny and appreciate though how one of the tabuli tells you about like this architect, Sison, that
Hmm.
helped the demon lord or whatever of the land shape the island into like a maze-like environment with equipment randomly distributed through it. I thought that was pretty great as a way of like trying to
Explaining it,
diegetically
yeah.
contextualize the fact that you are just kind of walking through like a maze that every room kind of seems kind of similar to the last. I thought
Yeah.
that was funny.
Yeah, and I like too the element of like he was like hiding the equipment and resources around because even though he's being forced into like servitude for Galsus, he like is trying to like undermine him in some ways. It's almost like a Rogue One kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? Where he like builds the weakness into the Death Star or whatever, same kind of deal.
For sure.
Which is a neat little piece of world building and lore. And yeah, I agree. It like makes a they thought about it, right? They were like, oh, well, maybe we should give a little bit of a reason why all this stuff is here. Which is it's cute. It's cute for sure. Yeah. And the tabulae and memoirs I think are also a really interesting way to convey the kind of backstory and narrative. We talked a little bit earlier about like how it's somewhat similar to Dark Souls, how Dark Souls like conveys a lot of its lore and storytelling through like item descriptions. But I actually think this is a superior way of doing that because it is more baked into the actual like loop of the game too, I think. Like you're always like we were talking about before, you're going further and further into the dungeon as you explore, you're getting these tablets and you're getting these memoir pages. And then, you're prompted by your material circumstances to go back to the town, right? And restock, resupply, all that. But you're also going back to Charlotte so that she can translate them for you, and then that also gives you another motivation to come back to town later because it takes her time to translate. So you go back into the dungeon, you come back after a little while, and then she'll be done, and then you can find out, what that tablet said or the memoir said. So I like that they've kind of built like a narrative motivation alongside the kind of gameplay motivations for you to go back and forth between the dungeon and town. And then I think that also kind of provides a nice breadcrumb of narrative elements
Hmm.
as you're going through. Like you always get just bits and pieces more, and because they kind of know what path you're going to take through the dungeon, they also like know where they can space out the tablets to not give you too much information, but just enough that like it's relevant to where you're at in the story, which I think ends up being really narratively satisfying. How did you guys feel about that?
I actually quite liked it. I mean, I thought the progression's really interesting from the narrative stance. The way they have it that you have to go back and forth, and it kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
like
a cute idea to have her like translate, right?
And you also get a free lunch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it really like motivates you to like keep bonding as it were with like this sister character that you have
Mhm.
by tying the story so much to kind of just seeing her again. And the free lunch is a nice bonus. But yeah, I do like that. Like it feels like deliberately paced in a way. In that like I remember like reading like the memoirs. First of all, like I like how we're essentially getting two different types of like historical sources. We're getting like
Mhm.
a primary historical source and like the memoir, which is like a first-hand account written by somebody. But it's like so far it's kind of hard to parse how it's like really related to the overall lore of the game, other than the fact that like at first it's like, oh yeah, like I'm with my sister, we're really close. And then like I think the most recent memoir I got is just like, oh no, something terrible happened. That kind of
Yes.
like little message that's common in storytelling like this. But then on the other hand, like the tabulae are like kind of these presented as these authoritative, like historical sources, meant to like paint a clear picture of like the history, which is kind of like leading me to believe is like I wonder if those two are going to like intersect in more clear ways, and
That's
is
what
like
I
are the
wonder.
tabulae actually like fully trustworthy as these authoritative sources? That's kind of where I'm wondering if the game goes more
Hmm.
with that.
Or are they about like who's ever writing the memoirs to begin with?
Mm,
Or, yeah, it's like it's interesting. It brings up questions.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really interested to see what you guys think when we get a few more of those and we actually kind of have the conclusion of the story, and a lot of the questions you guys you're raising right now get revealed. I'm really curious to see what you guys think. But you guys are, I will say, you're asking the right questions and you're thinking about the right things.
Yay!
So that's good. That's good. Yeah, I really like to, Alex, how you mentioned like the voice of each set of like lore documents is so different. So the memoirs are very personal and they're really like a diary, right? So you're kind of getting a lot of like this one specific person's like character and like anxieties and hangups and things, which I think kind of gives like a different impression than the like really dry kind of historical texts that come from the tablets. And I think that it kind of creates like almost like an inverted kind of motivation for them. Like at first, I was really interested in the tablets because I'm like, oh, I got to know more about like where am I and what's going on with these places that I'm investigating. But then as I got further in the game, I got more and more interested in the memoirs as opposed to the tablets, partially because some of the details from the sometimes like later in the game, the tablets more just confirm things you might already suspect based on events in the narrative. But then also because like I just became more enraptured with like the personal narrative of the person writing the memoirs as opposed to the more dry
So you've
historical
become
stuff.
invested.
Yes, yes, yes. And they become, whoops, sorry. They become more of a character as you get further and further in their little diary entries. And so there are sparse character moments in this game, and so that gives you also kind of another thing to kind of hold on to as you narratively as you progress through the game. And then yeah, I agree with you both too. Audra, you'll kind of get this comparison, but I think Charlotte is kind of the protagonist Dogi here, right? Like
Ooh,
somebody
yes.
that you're going back to and then that you
Mm-hmm.
interact with regularly, and that kind of fleshes out both her and him, right? Like through their
Yes,
relationship.
that is a good
Um,
comparison.
yeah, yeah, because I think most of Adol's characterization actually comes from Dogi and like Dogi's reactions to him or whichever
Yes.
companion he has at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the same thing here, right? Like Charlotte and her expressions of like concern for you, and she'll reference elements of your past or her past and things like that. And that really kind of fleshes out the sense of who she is and who you are as a character, which is really cool. And I really like Charlotte. I think she's, we have a feature coming up pretty soon that's about bad child characters. Or actually is it going to be an episode of, I think it's actually going to be an episode of Retro,
Yeah.
Oh,
we're
wow.
going to talk about bad child characters we like and child characters we don't like. And I think Charlotte is a very good child character,
Oh,
right?
that's a good
Like
choice. Yeah.
I think, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Actually, now that I'm thinking, I might change mine unless one of you is going to be on that and wants to use her, but I might put her on mine. Because she's a very well done, like she is that kind of little sister character where she's a little naive. She's very smart, but she's not as worldly as the protagonist. But she's very concerned about his well-being. She like kind of makes jokes with him, and she gives you that kind of more like softer side to the world, and gives you, you kind of feel a sense of responsibility towards her, but not necessarily in that traditional like protector role, because she's not the one facing danger, you are. And they kind of invert that a little bit, where she's the one who finds you when you're injured. She's the one who's like kind of worried about your well-being and looking out for you. And you get a sense that like she's kind of the emotional center of the pair, and while you're kind of out there doing the more physical labor, she's kind of the thing that's keeping you like sane, right? And I think that's a really cool dynamic that they have. Um, and it's hard to do child characters well, and I think Falcom a lot of times
Yes.
doesn't do them well.
They can
um,
struggle with them.
yeah, yeah, but this is a really good one, and I think too. Just this game in general, and Audrey, you might have some thoughts about this because you've played so many Falcom games. It is so restrained compared to most Falcom games storytelling. Like, um, they really don't lean into some of the tropes that Falcom's really like known for leaning heavily on, and you don't have a
Yes.
lot of those kind of things in the game.
Like the whole sister and brother dynamic doesn't seem weird.
Right. Yes.
Unfortunately,
It's not
Falcom.
romantic. Yeah, they're adopted
Yes.
siblings and they don't have crushes on each other. Yeah, wow. Imagine that. Because
So
Falcom loves to do
innovative.
that. Yeah.
No, I mentioned at the beginning that I hadn't played a lot of Falcom games, and the anime tropiness of some of their other series are a big reason why I never really dived in, despite being like interested in what the games are. But the fact that this game seemed much different in terms of like its aesthetic and vibe is kind of what made me very much more interested.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's such a big departure from their other games. I mean, there's really only one other game that I think has a similar vibe and tone and aesthetic to this, and it's my other favorite Falcom game, which is Brandish: The Dark Revenant on the PSP.
Mhm.
But they really, this kind of darker, more brooding atmosphere, the more somber tone, the more like stark aesthetic is not something they typically go for, but they do it so well here that it really makes me wish they had more games like this.
Hmm.
And that they would return to this kind of style. And actually, the scenario writer for this game was Yoshihiro Kondo, so he is kind of the creative lead of Falcom. He is one of the main writers on most of the Trails games and pretty much all of the Modern Ease games. And I think it's really crazy that he did this game because it's so different than his other work. But it shows like a level of, skill that he has, that he could actually do something so different than his other games and
Maybe
still
one
make it
day he'll go back
compelling.
to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope one
maybe it
day
was
he
a bit of
does.
a passion project for him if it's that much of a departure. It's just like, oh, he
Yeah.
knows like the fans like this other style, but he's just like, oh, I'm kind of interested in changing it up a bit.
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting, and I wonder if he is also like a fan of Yasumi Matsuno's work, because this feels like such a love
I
letter, I think, to those
yes, I
games.
imagine he would have to be like the Matsuno vibes are so strong here.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But it's so crazy, and I know, yeah, Audra, you probably agree. Like, it's so crazy that he's the one who wrote this game because it's just,
It is. It's.
yeah.
I mean, nothing against the other Falcom games, but it's
No,
very
no.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Falcom. Even though some things about their games I don't
Hmm.
like generally I think they're
Even if
very
they're
talented.
tropey, they're fun.
Yeah,
Usually.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just it just shows like, oh wow, they're capable of like so many different
Hmm.
things that we don't really see from them as much anymore. But I think Xanadu Next really kind of embodies that kind of variety that they could bring to the genre. Um, and
One day,
hopefully they get the
maybe.
chance. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to kind of leave it. We'll pick
Mm,
up next time for part two. We can talk a little more about the second half of the game. We didn't get to talk about like things like boss fights or stuff, but we can talk about that the next time. I think that'll
Yeah.
work out fine
for
if
sure.
you guys feel okay about that. All
Yeah, no
right.
problem.
Good.
We'll
Good.
talk about that spider soon enough.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Scutella. Or
Skulltula. Yeah. Which
or
I
Which has
mean
got to
that.
Scutella.
be a Zelda
Is that
reference.
right? Yes, it has to be. It has to be. Oh, definitely, definitely. I totally agree, Alex. Yeah, that next time in 2 weeks from when you're hearing this, we'll be doing Xanadu Next Part Two, and then speaking of Zelda, after that, we're going to be doing an episode on Zelda tier list ranking,
Ooh.
which I am very excited about. Alex, you're going to be on that too, right?
Oh, for sure. I'm very, very
Yeah.
excited. Been thinking a
Yeah.
lot about Zelda recently. Been playing a lot of Zelda. I'm ready.
Yeah, me too. And I know Matt's going to be on that. And he's been like mainlining so many Zelda
Yeah.
games in the last few weeks. He's getting so prepped. So that's going to be cool. I think he's going to be really fresh on a lot of those games, which I think will bring an interesting perspective to the
Hmm.
table. And if you want to reach out to the show, you can email us at retro@rpgfan.com. Make sure to follow us on all our social media. So Facebook, Instagram, we're on Threads, we're on Twitter, we're on Blue Sky, Twitch, and YouTube, all as RPG Fan or RPG Fan Com. And then please, feel free to join the RPG Fan Discord. That's a good way to talk to people who have been on the podcast. So definitely do that. We also have the RPG Fan Shop hosted by TeePublic. I believe there's a link on the website for that. And we've got quite a few different merch things there: coffee mugs, shirts, stuff like that. Baby onesies, even, or well, actually, the onesie might be gone now, huh? But that is something that's been on the shop before, so check out and see if that's there. We also have our other shows, Random Encounter, which the most recent episode was about Mina the Hollower, and then Audra, you were on there as well, weren't you?
Oh yes, about Coffee Talk Tokyo.
Yeah, so if you didn't get enough of Audra on this episode, definitely check out that episode. And then we also have Rhythm Encounter, which is our RPG fan music podcast. There hasn't been one in a while, but they did do the Music of the Year podcast this year. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, do check that one out. Because, if you want to hear some very smart people talk about music, Mike hosts that one and he does a fantastic job. You can review us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. Please review us. We love getting feedback, especially if it's 5 stars. If it's not 5 stars or whatever the equivalent is, you can still do it, but please don't savage us in the reviews. And then as for where you can find us on social media, you can contact me at benloganlove@gmail.com. And then how about you, Audra?
Audra B at rpgfan.com.
And Alex?
Aleks Franiczek at gmail.com.
All right, great. Well, thank you all for listening, and good night and good luck.